Dear colleagues, dear audience, dear chairman, welcome to my presentation of my 9-month progress report about my PhD topic, investigation of the effects of biological therapies on the cardiovascular risk. I'm Noémi Galajda, first-year PhD student at the Department of Dermatology, Venerology at Dermatooncology. I'm doing my research work under the supervision of Ágnes and Péter Holló. And during my work, my vision is to reduce the burden caused by comorbidities in patients with immune-mediated inflammatory diseases. And to achieve that, I would like to optimize the therapeutic order, considering these, the effect of these therapies on comorbidities. I have two ongoing projects, both of them covering the field of biological treatments, namely TNF inhibitors on the risk of cardiovascular risk. Cardiovascular diseases are among the leading causes of morbidity and mortality worldwide, and the main pathogenical causes atherosclerosis, in which a key inflammatory player is the tumor necrosis factor. TNF is also an important cytokine for the pathomechanism of IMiDs, and in immune-mediated inflammatory diseases, there is an increased risk of developing serious cardiovascular events compared to the general population. About the TNF inhibitors, they are widely used biological treatments among these populations, and through the inhibition of the TNF-mediated inflammatory processes, they may have a beneficial effect on the cardiovascular risk. Unfortunately, they are not among the first-line systemic therapies in IMiDs. However, the conventional immunosuppressants are the first-line systemic options, but they do not directly act on the TNF-mediated pathways. So our objective was to investigate the effect of TNF inhibitors compared to the conventional treatments on the risk of cardiovascular events. So our clinical question was whether the TNF inhibitors have an effect on the occurrence of CV events. And we included all immune-mediated inflammatory diseases patients, and we compared the TNF inhibitors with non-biological therapies, and we measured the incidence of different cardiovascular events. We hypothesized that TNF inhibitors can decrease the risk of cardiovascular events. We conducted our systematic search and selection, and at the end of this process, we got 56 eligible articles, from which 29 could be included in the meta-analysis. In this presentation, I will show you our main analysis with pooled incidence rate ratios and their confidence intervals. On the first forest plot, we can see the risk of MACE among patients with psoriasis, associated psoriatic arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, and inflammatory bowel diseases patients. And we compared TNF inhibitors with conventional systemic non-biological treatment groups. And as you can see, we got the overall effect of 0.77, which means that those who were treated by TNF inhibitors had more than 20% lower risk to develop MACE compared to the conventional treated ones. We could also conduct a subgroup analysis with rheumatoid arthritis and psoriatic patients, and this risk-lowering effect was maintained. The results were not only clinically relevant, but also statistically significant. Moving forward with cerebrovascular events, we compared the same treatment groups among the same populations, and we got similar results in the overall effect and also with a subgroup analysis. And as a third forest plot, as a third result, I would like to show you the risk of myocardial infarction among the same populations. And the overall effect was 0.69, which means that among TNF-treated patients, there were 30% lower risk to get myocardial infarction compared to the conventionally treated patients. We have several strengths. This is the first comprehensive review measuring the effect of TNF inhibitors in all immune-mediated inflammatory diseases in which TNF inhibitors are used. And our subgroup analysis showed the first results that confirm the benefit of TNF inhibitors versus conventional treatments in psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. And we have also some limitations. These were non-randomized observational studies, and the outcome definitions and the composite of the comparator groups were heterogeneous. As a conclusion, we can say that TNF inhibitors can decrease the risk of cardiovascular events compared to the conventional systemic therapies in IMiDs. And as an implication, therefore, we encourage the use of TNF inhibitors as a first-line treatment in individuals who have higher cardiovascular risk. And as an implication for research, we can say that randomized control trials or well-designed longitudinal studies are needed, and unified cardiovascular event definitions are also necessary, for which a good option is to use international disease codes. So our manuscript is already written and ready for internal review, and you can see our target journals. As a second project, we would like to investigate the risk of the effect of TNF inhibitors on the risk of heart failure. So as I mentioned previously, TNF inhibitors are widely used treatment options in immune-mediated inflammatory diseases. They are safe subcutaneously or intravenously applied treatments. But in rare cases, there can be multiple potential adverse effects as well. One of them is heart failure. In 2003, the Food and Drug Administration reported a summary of 38 new onset and 9 worsening cases of heart failures, and since then the therapeutic guidelines recommend the cautious use of TNF inhibitors in milder cases, and they have absolute contraindication in advanced severe cases of heart failure. However, when we see the literature, we can see clinical trials, cohort studies, and also registry data with controversial findings, encouraging us to systematically review this topic and investigate the effect of TNF inhibitors separately on the risk of heart failure. So our clinical question is that do TNF inhibitors increase the risk of heart failure? We use the PICO framework. We would like to compare TNF inhibitors with placebo and here as well non-biological therapies. And our outcome would be the hospitalization for heart failure, either de novo and exacerbation cases. We hypothesize that TNF inhibitors don't increase the risk of occurrence or worsening of heart failure. And our clinical implication is that after our work, the revision of therapeutic guidelines for the use of TNF inhibitors in heart failure affected patients would be needed. So this is the progress or the status of our second project, and here you can see the 2 ongoing projects summary. Thank you for your attention.
My question is, how in the first project, how long was the follow-up in general in those studies?
Thank you for your question. It's one big problem because the follow-up times are very different from study to study, and in several cases they didn't reported any follow-up times. So therefore, we did some statistical analysis using multivariate hazard ratios, which includes these calculations with follow-up times. I presented previously in the previous progress reports. But in a nutshell, I can say that it's between half a year to 10 or 20 years. So there are very long registered data as well.
Subgroup analysis, like for the shorter and the 10 year is widely different from the half a year?
We didn't, because we couldn't do subgroup analysis, because there are the numbers we could pull. It's not enough, yes.
So, hypothetical question. What would happen, in your opinion, if you would use TNF inhibitors in healthy individuals or like older patients? Would that decrease their risk for heart disease?
It's a good question. I assume that it would be probably great for prevention as well, but I don't know. Maybe it's according to the basic research findings, it could stabilize the already existed plaques, so maybe it can be.
So in your opinion, your results, what you see here, is not only due to the decrease of the disease burden that the patients already have. So
theoretically, probably, yes.
So if you have patients with like early symptoms of psoriasis, really early, and if you would have the option of give them like methotrexate or TNF inhibitor, you think that TNF inhibitors may actually be superior in preventing cardiac side effects, right?
Yes, we can hypothesize that, yes, theoretically.
Thank you, very interesting presentation. In your first project, if I remember correctly, you said you were pooling adjusted odds ratios, domain adjusted odds ratios, right?
Hazard
ratios, yes. Right, okay. And I was wondering how many confounders were included in those models when they were adjusting the effect sizes, and what was the overlap of confounders between the different studies? So were they essentially the same, and about how many of these were there?
Thank you for your question. There were several confounding factors which were included in the models, and therefore we had to categorize these to be able to pool and statistically analyze this data. And I can give you some examples. They included medications, other cardiovascular risk factors like diabetes mellitus, hypertension, and also risk factors and clinical features about the immune-mediated inflammatory diseases like severity or other inflammatory markers as well. So there were a lot of confounding factors which were adjusted.
Great. I have two more questions. Very nice work. Congrats. Have you performed subgroup analysis in connection with the TNF inhibitors themselves? For example, etanercept versus adalimumab or so?
Yeah, we sought to do that, but we couldn't, because they reported the data in groups, not regarding the specific active substances. So most of the groups were already mixed with adalimumab, infliximab, and also etanercept, and we couldn't do separate analysis. But it could be a research implication as well to compare specific active substances to know the special effects of these special active substances.
Thank you very much. And I have one more question. Do you think that TNF inhibitors are good in preventing cardiovascular events because they just lower the TNF level or the inflammation itself? In other words, other targeted therapies would be that good as well? What do you think?
Yes, actually we are planning to do other researches with the other anti-inflammatory therapies as well, and we assume that through the inhibition of the inflammatory processes can be affect this preventive clinical effect. But according to these meta-analyses, we cannot say that it is good for prevention, but just
question,
we
yes,
can. Yes.
Rather. Okay, perfect. Thanks.